Guys, please forgive that horrific thumbnail. I am so sorry. I was playing around on Photoshop for like at least 30 minutes, and I made that absolute atrocity. I am so sorry. But listen, I was watching my boy, Charlie White. I was watching favorite one of my favorite YouTubers here on YouTube. And I couldn't help but jump on it because like I'm a scientist. It's my duty. For those of you that don't know, I'm a what's up, dude? How you doing? For those of you that don't know, I am a chemist. I'm a biochemist. I work at a company called Thermo Fisher. We make science and indulge in scientific technologies. My specialty there is monoclonal antibodies. That's what we work with. So that's what I do. I have my undergrad degree in biochemistry and in chemistry. Technically, I have two. And then I have a master's degree in chemistry with graduate certificates in organic chemistry, analytical chemistry, and biochemistry. So I'm a fairly well read guy when it comes to science, and I feel uniquely qualified to jump on scientific takes, right? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a specialist, I am not an expert. However, I feel like I've been given the unique set of tools that allow me to jump on a conversation like this. And also, I should note, I am a big time listener of the Joe Rogan experience. Always have. I've listened to Joe Rogan um, since 2011 when it was insanely obscure. No one had heard of it. Well, it's not like it was the smallest thing in the world, but like I was going through old pictures and I was like really shocked and really happy that it made it to the top 10 podcast list. I think it was like number 8 or something, right? And this is back in 2015, 2014, something like that. So it's safe to say I'm a really long time listener, like more than 10 years. Long time listener of the Joe Rogan experience, and I've had my fair share of falling off, right? Especially like, it plays itself out every now and then. I'm right now I haven't really listened to the JRE in a while, right? It's been at least like a couple months. But I'm a long time listener and I would religiously listen to Joe Rogan, right? Um Huge fan of Penguin Zero. And both are talking about my field of science. Well, not exactly my field. It's more like mathematical based, but still, they're both talking about my forte. They're talking about science. So I felt uniquely qualified to clock in here and give you all my take on this because although you could say that you don't care about my take, and fair enough, right? I feel like I have a lot to say on it. And so if you find it rewarding, we can uh, we can have the conversation together. I'm about 3 minutes in to a 10-minute video, and that might have been me just trying to get a thumbnail there at 3:34. So let's back it up and start from the beginning. First, let me check my levels on YouTube. want to make sure that you can hear me. All right, can you hear me?
You got to watch the.
Yeah, okay. So I've noticed this too with my playbacks. All right, I'll mute me actually. But what I notice is when I play it back, there's like a blank screen for no reason. For no reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to reshare. I'm going to reshare it and hopefully it'll actually pop up. Yeah, no. That's really weird.
Neil deGrasse Tyson response.
Okay. Oh, okay. Cool. I think we're up. Yeah, I don't know. For some reason it just like doesn't play anything for a little while. And yeah, so we're up. We're good to go. So let me just
Response to Terrence Howard.
So this is Terrence Howard.
This is so meta, by the way. This is extremely meta. I understand it. I understand the irony behind this. This is like as removed from the conversation as possible. This is a person on a podcast that is being responded to by Neil deGrasse Tyson. So it's a response that Charlie is reacting to. So it's a reaction to a response. And then I am reacting to the reaction to the response to the podcast. This is so far removed. This is not lost on me. This is so far removed. But let's keep playing.
Attempting to reinvent mathematics.
Neil deGrasse Tyson is one of the greatest scientific communicators, and he's also simultaneously one of the most like, egotistical people ever. This is a guy who honestly would probably love the smell of his own farts, and I have so much respect for the man. I've learned so much by listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson, but this man loves himself so goddamn much, and he loves listening to himself talk. It's insane. It's insane. The way that he could just paint a picture is incredible. And then he will consistently interrupt you on a podcast to paint that picture. He's just like insufferable in the context of a podcast. And I find that really ironic, actually, because Neil deGrasse Tyson was one of the first big time guests that I had seen on the Joe Rogan Experience, and I was really excited for. Yeah. He's I love watching his content on other platforms, but I literally cannot stand listening to him engage with another human being. It grinds my gears, honestly.
And physics. A little backstory.
Successfully,
I
too,
took
by the way.
initial interest in Terrence.
Let's see what the comments are saying now. Because when this initially came out, all the comments were like, man, Terrence Howard is a fucking genius. Man, Terrence Howard really gets it. I didn't realize he was so intelligent. Meanwhile, he's actually just talking about gobbledygook.
I think so. You'll notice that I started this video with me attempting to qualify my background in science. That wasn't an appeal to authority. That wasn't trying to insert my credibility. That was just to give you context as to how I'm going to approach this. I would never ask you to believe my argument based on my degree. I would never ask you, the viewer, to just take me at my word. I want you to know the lens through which I see this, but I would never say, believe me because I know what I'm talking about. That's not how I operate. So I think that anyone from any background can talk about science. Some are more valid than others, but if you operate with a certain set of assumptions, everyone should get to the same conclusion. That is the scientific method. The scientific method is what would be true if I assumed the opposite. Let's explore that. Let's look for the evidence of that. If I don't see it, then that is weeded out. For example, right? Like that would be omitting a certain, like, so I have a theory that's backed by a certain background, right? I have a theory that it's my theory is that it's caused by A. What would be true if the theory was caused by A? What would not be true if the theory was not caused by A? I don't know. It's 1:37 right now. So I'm not going to get too deep into that, but all I'm trying to get at there is every person should be able to engage with the scientific method and come to the same conclusion. Consensus isn't I'm right, everybody look at how right I am. It's I got to this answer, 2.7. You did the math and got to 2.5. The answer is probably 2.6 within a certain standard deviation. We get at the truth collectively. So every single person is okay to engage in their own scientific pursuits, regardless of how ridiculous that sounds. If you're trying to prove that the earth is flat, you will end up proving that the earth is round. We've seen it, right? It's okay to explore it's okay to explore flat earth. As ridiculous as that is, it's okay to explore it. As long as you're exploring it with a hefty amount of skepticism the entire way through, that is an okay thing to explore. Nothing is taboo. And no matter your background, you should be able to explore these things. You just have to take it with a grain of salt because sometimes you're not fully trained to vet ideas when they're absurd.
1 × 1 = 2. I've reinvented sacred geometry with a hydrogen proton, selling drones to Uganda based on the hydrogen proton geometry, which the drones don't exist. Okay. Now the comments have flipped. They turned on him. I still remember the day. Well, actually, the 3 or.
Okay, so this periodic table really excites me because it's a new way to look at the periodic table. I always want people to find a better way to display scientific facts. If what he's saying is true, then I would love it to be visualized or conceptualized in a more appropriate way. A lot of people are saying that what he's saying is completely off base. And I get that. I understand that perspective because to a non-scientist, it's really hard to engage with the scientific pursuit. And many people either accept scientists outright, whatever they say is fact, or They rebel against it completely, and whatever they say is false, because of course they would. They're a shill. Either way resists the scientific pursuit. And so, in my own opinion, there's nothing more scientific than trying to find a unique way of displaying scientific facts from a new lens. We all know how bad science communication is. Like Turkey Tom said himself, we need to stop being fucking nerds about it, right? It's so important for us as scientists to explain ideas in the most convincing way possible. The optics are so important.
4 days after this episode came out, people were like, man, Terrence Howard is so fucking smart. Look at what he said and look at what he did.
Some people. And I understand that the comment section might have looked like that, and it could have been curated in that way to showcase that viewpoint. I remember almost immediately people took issue with this podcast because it was everywhere, and people either were saying, wow, what a unique way to look at it, which is mainly what I got because that's my perspective. Following that up, I saw a lot of commentary on this about how dumb this conversation was. I don't think that conversations like this are stupid on their face. I think that if they come to stupid conclusions, like 1 times 1 is 1, or sorry, 1 times 1 is 2. If it comes to an absurd conclusion, obviously the idea is incorrect, but the pursuit is in finding wherein that argument produces that incorrect result. It's not that, oh, it's wrong because it produces the wrong thing. It's that, oh, no, it's wrong because this gear right here is doubling the value, therefore giving this incorrect result. But if we just tweak that gear, we can actually get at the answer more streamlined using this method. It's a source by which we can optimize the world if we engage in a process with a beginner's mindset of not assuming what everyone else does is fact or what everyone else does is the best way to do it. If we approach things in a novel and unique way, we can get at the solution in such a way that might even be a shortcut, a wormhole, if you will, straight to the answer. Rather than going the traditional roundabout way, we could go straight to it. I truly believe, and I've done this often in my career, if I approach something differently than what everyone else is doing, yes, it's different. Yes, it looks weird. But if I arrive at the answer with half the steps, my way is better. And if we're truly living in a meritocracy, which we're really not, but if we truly wanted to live in a meritocracy, you would then follow my method. And if it was really a meritocracy, I would be rewarded for finding a shortcut which produces the same result in half the steps. That is how we improve. That's how we optimize. That's how we make the world better. It's coming at the same conclusion in half the steps with half the resources. That's what it's about. So I am a fan of this pursuit. I don't really like the perspective that non-scientists can't engage in a scientific pursuit. So I think that on its face, I disagree with Charlie, but that's a little deeper.
And all the comments were on his side and shit about like, damn, so deep. I knew we couldn't trust math. But Charlie, he invented virtual reality. Check out his patent. I know. Not only did he invent virtual reality, he invented the very fucking dimension in which we inhabit while he was still in his mother's womb.
I did see this part of the conversation. First of all, he's a paid actor. Okay, so let's get that just out of the way. Um, when you're in the womb, you have a developing brain. We know that the developing brain has consciousness. Well, I mean that's a good question, right? Does a baby have consciousness? We would think so. We can engage with a baby in such a way that it seemingly has consciousness, right? Anybody who's interacted with a baby knows. That's a poor argument, but if you've ever had experience being around a newborn child, you know that they have consciousness in like a minimal capacity, but they have consciousness. That doesn't just begin at birth, right? Like that great it's a it's my estimation, because I don't know this for fact, but it's my estimation that we can take consciousness down to a granular level. And if we assume that babies have consciousness, if we make that assumption, if we interact with babies and we see a similarity of consciousness in them, it would then therefore follow that you've had consciousness since you were in the womb. You might not have the language as we know it. You might not have the spoken word just yet. But you have a very limited capacity to observe the world. You actually hear the world because sound will travel into your, into your mother's tongue, right? Into your mother's uterine wall. No, into your mom, into your mother. I can't I can't fucking do this. But sound will travel into the womb, right? It's muffled, but it will be there. You know this because you go to a concert and the baby's going to be dancing around. And also just physics, right? Like sound waves just don't absolutely get obliterated at the stomach, right? If you put your hands over your ears right now, you could tell that even though that your ears are blocked, sound waves still oscillate your vestibular membrane. They might not be like cleared out and ready for vibrations just yet in that way, but let's say, for example, you are underwater, right? Like that would be fairly analogous to your vestibular membrane being submerged in some sort of fluid. It's not amniotic fluid, so it's not going to be one-to-one comparison, but it's going to be analogous to what you would hear if you were in the womb. So you can observe things through sound. Light is the same way. If you put a light up to your hand, you can see this red glare, and you can almost see what's inside your hand with like some limited capacity. When you close your eyes, light still travels into your eyes, as limited as that is. So you have this limited capacity with limited sight and limited sound to observe the world. I say all this because you have a developing brain that's capable of making memories and dreaming. And this is an idea that I've often thought about. When you're in the womb and you don't have any context of the world, but you have a brain that undergoes REM sleep, what do you dream about? You don't have the spoken word, so you're not dreaming about people talking, really. I mean, you can sort of dream about sounds, and your mother's voice is the first sound that you hear because it reverberates throughout the entire body that you're growing within. So your mother's voice is so deep and primal within every single person. But if you have no context to build a dream from, what do you dream of? Dreams are like narratives that play out in such a way that are illustrations of the world around us. It's how our subconscious mind builds the world as we see it. Our perception is built not upon just like identifying things like that's a table, that's a table, that's a TV. It's just like large box sphere, or large box rectangle, light source, point light source. Our worldview is built on the objects and their utility. What do they do? What do they look like? Where in the space are they? When you close your eyes, is it an infinite expanse or a dark closet? So that would be like an indication of how deep is the world in your own perception. You have no context of any of this. You don't have context of depth. You don't have context of objects and their utility. You don't have context of objects and their titles that we've given them. You don't operate within the world of language. So, what then is the stuff of dreams for a newborn? You know, all of those ideas are super fascinating to me. And what I love about this conversation is Terrence has this ability to have this conversation. Nobody really asks, what do you dream about when you have no context to the world just yet? You have a brain capable of dreaming. We all do it. And obviously there are times when babies are more active in the womb. This would maybe indicate that there are sleep-wake cycles when the baby is in the womb. The baby can't be just like sleeping the entire time, right? So obviously there must be a time where the baby is awake. If that's true, and they have brains capable of producing dreams, it would then therefore follow that babies in the womb would have dreams, and what would they dream about? So that's a question. But another question is, can you make memories with the limited observations that you have at your disposal? Can you make memories of your hand, for example, being in front of your face? Can you make memories of being in the womb? You have a brain capable of making memories. I think it really comes down to how you conceptualize memory. Because if memory is just a sequence of events and no events have happened in your perception because you haven't been born yet, I don't think that you can conceive of memories occurring while you're in the womb. However, if you think about memories as observations, if it's strictly just the sensory input that you have from your eyes, from your ears, from your touch, you can touch things in the womb. You can see things behind well, I don't know that actually. Like, I don't actually know if you can open your eyes in the womb. I would assume you can't. But that's just an assumption. I actually don't know. You can definitely hear in the womb. So if you can make like very primal observations, then you should be able to make very primal memories, because memories are just a replayed series of observations. So because of that, I don't think it's absurd to assume that you could make memories in the womb. I think it's very unlikely because you don't have the hardware really necessary. Like nothing has necessitated the nothing has necessitated memories just yet. Like memories serve you because they explain what exactly you should do next based on a series of pattern recognition. I don't understand how you would need to make memories just yet, but that could really just be my limited perception of it. We really don't know too much about what goes on in the womb like that. And like you can come at me with OBGYN comments, right? But we have this ban on observing embryos beyond 14 days. You actually cannot conduct a study, and Radio Lab did this entire podcast on it, detailing exactly why the 14-day rule exists. But you actually cannot conduct a study where you observe an embryo beyond 14 days. So there's this period between 14 days and I don't know when babies really first become apparent, right? Because 14 days in, you really don't know if you're pregnant or not. You could test for sure, but only if you're consistently testing. You're really like at that point, you're only just a little bit late, and so you're probably not going to test. But my thought is, there's this interval after 14 days and before when we typically observe and monitor babies in the womb. I forget exactly where that start date is, but we don't really know. There's this interval where it's just this blackout period. And so I don't know exactly when memories begin. I probably assume it's when the hippocampus forms or shortly after the hippocampus forms, namely because the hippocampus is responsible for encoding memory. Beyond that, I think you are capable of creating memories. So I don't understand how it would be completely absurd to think that you could form memories in the womb. I think that's a really silly idea, but I don't think it's an absurd conclusion to draw from our data. So,
Did you know he has memories from the womb? I know. He's just built so different.
I see. I don't think he's built different. I think every human being is like that. We don't typically recall our memories from the womb, but I guarantee it's something that we have subconscious. I think it's like a very subconscious molding.
Would you debate Terrence Howard on his math? Sure. I feel like anyone would be more than willing to. But I also feel like if someone's going to debate Terrence Howard, it shouldn't be me, because that would immediately bring Terrence Howard, that was supposed to be the guy reinventing math, down to the level of just a fucking goober streamer content creator. That's who I'll debate. That guy. I'll display my math prowess against that guy. No, not actual mathematicians, please, God, no. But I'd be more than willing to. It is completely indefensible with 1 times 1 equals 2. The only way he gets away with that is by spamming buzzwords that actual Neanderthals think mean something. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter what, you can never show that 1 times 1 equals 2. But you can always show that 1 times 1 equals 1. It's the easiest demonstration ever. And the only way Terrence Howard weasels his way out of it every time is just with nonsense quantum buzzwords. If you debated him, you should just out buzzword him. Oh, I'd be dropping so many buzzwords on him just to like throw him in like some kind of fucking stun lock. Mr. Howard, please stop bloviating. It's like you haven't even considered the Bose-Einstein paradox. As of course you know, this is elementary. And he'd be like, Bose-Einstein, Higgs boson.
Yeah. Hold up. 1 second. 1 second. An invisible man says, I'm a unsub. All right, champ. I appreciate the honesty. Thank you for that. That's the first _invisible_man. You are my first comment on any YouTube video, on any YouTube live that I've ever done, except for people that I've brought in from other communities. You are the first ever. Now, it does say in here, I'm an unsub. So I'm just gonna look this up really quick. I want to see if this is actually true. All right, so I'm at 179. I'm at 179 subscribers, which isn't much, but hey, you got to start somewhere. And I'm curious if this is true. I don't think YouTube has the capacity to look up who's following you. So I think that maybe it might not actually be possible to look up whether or not that you subscribe to me. But I would be very curious to I'd be very curious if you were the first comment ever and it was I'm a unsub. Ooh, you know what I can do? I'll take a picture of it and that'll go on the wall somewhere. My first comment ever was I'm a unsub. I genuinely find that, like, I love a good shit talk, right? I love a good shit post. That's funny to me. That is my humor. If you just keep that energy, I'll love you forever.
Action Bronson believes in Terrence Howard. Oh my god! Wait, is it a joke?
What in the actual fuck?
First of all,
I understand it though.
I kind of
understand it. I understand.
Kind, I mean, it made sense.
I feel like he doesn't understand it.
To me, he's making
making
me
sense.
believe.
He's way too smart to just be making everything up. There's no way he just
this fucking genius. You can't just make up 1 × 1 = 2. That's
okay. See, this is the problem that I have. This is the problem that I have with this take, because intelligence is not understanding a set of facts. It's not like, if you're an intelligent person, it's not that you just have a multitude of different facts in front of you, because like what then is your purpose? Like, you could just have Google and it would do the same thing. Intelligence really, to me, I don't even think it's just to me. I think it's it's namely known for this characteristic. It's known for its characteristic of being able to arrive at a conclusion with a limited set of assumptions. Sorry. Being able to correctly conclude with a limited set of assumptions the correct answer. No, that's not exactly correct. I mean, it's the ability to solve problems. To put it most succinctly, Intelligence is your ability to solve problems without being told the answer or being fed the answer through factoids. I think that's probably what I would qualify it with. It's your ability to solve the Rubik's Cube. Not just to know that one side is red and the other side is green, but it's to take an unsolved Rubik's Cube and then solve it as quickly as possible. Like the most limited amount of time with the most limited set of resources, you could still solve the problem. It is your problem solving abilities and the speed with which you problem solve. That's intelligence. Taking a limited set of observations and arriving at the correct conclusion. Now, you could say that he is not arriving at the correct conclusion and is therefore unintelligent, right? That's a perspective you could have. But I just don't think that it's necessarily correct. I think it's the mechanism of problem solving. He's just beginning with an alternative set of assumptions. And I find that personally a noble pursuit. If you can start differently, everybody's starting at the same spot. 1 + 1 is 2. 1 times is 1. 1 times 1 can equal 2 if you define times in a different way. If you define times as the same thing as plus, if times equals plus, then 1 times 1 would equal 2. Yes. But you're building that into the cake. Like you are making that an assumption. You're adding another assumption to it. So you're arriving at that answer with more assumptions and a different set of assumptions. But it would be possible. But the way that we define times, it is not possible, because you would say 1 times 1 is 1, because one time is 1. If you were to do 1 2 times, that would be 1 times 2, 2. If you had 1 3 times, that would be 1 times 3. If you had 4 different times, that would be 4 times 4, which would be 16. That's the way you should think about that. That's what that literally means. However, if you're saying times equals plus, then 4 times 4 would be 8, because you're defining it differently. But you're just using a different set of words to describe a different operation. That's all it really is. So you have to begin with the same set of assumptions if you're going to arrive at the same answer. What Charlie is doing here is I think he's making an appeal to like common sense, basically. Like, well, it's common sense. Like 1 times 1 is 1. But the problem that I have with it, and I've seen this in his other video, is that he's not explaining why that's true correctly. That's where I start to like really have a problem with the video, because I mean, we can even go into his old video, right? And I know what you're going to say. We're 3 minutes in. We have like 7 minutes left of this one video. There's no way that we're going to go to a different one here, but just bear with me. because I wanted to make a video on this, but it just like it didn't seem worth it at the time. But I really had a problem with the way that this concept was being described. It was his first video on it. And by the way, I love Charlie. I don't know how many times I have to explain that, but I love Charlie. I really do. But okay, it's this video. This guy's not a genius. 4 million views. He posted it 3 weeks ago, right? Buy his waifu cup. It's great.
The species. That is just a fact. People are throwing away any level of thinking and rationality just to believe in the most out.
Okay, so we got the hook, right? We got the hook. Here we go. It's him explaining it with his cup, right? I had a huge issue with this right here.
No matter how much you want to believe in something correct, he is fishing around in the dark looking for a urinal to piss on, but he keeps pissing on the floor because he can't find it. He doesn't decide to just turn the lights on. He wants to live in this absolute like void of logic. I am going to demonstrate why 1 times 1 can never equal 2.
This right here. Okay, so he's gonna explain it, right? He's gonna prove it for once and for all.
A 3rd grader could do this. And I'm going to break it down in a way that no matter how stupid you are and no matter how much you want to believe in this concept, it can't work.
All right. Okay. And we've proven that I'm not a dumb person, you know. Having several different degrees in hard sciences would prove that I'm not an idiot. So we've got that established. Let's try and hear out this argument, right?
No dimension in the multiverse could this ever be a real possibility. So when you're saying times, when you're using multiplication here, you're talking about the groups of something. So 1 group of 1 is 1. But let's
group of something. I'm really trying to figure out how he conceptualizes multiplication. He's saying a group of something. And I think he's saying that because they will typically teach this concept of multiplication in ways of like bars, right? Where it's like you have 1 bar of 10, right? That's 10 one time. So 10 times 1, so you would have 10. And then they'd have like 2 bars, right? So 2 bars of 10. And they would say like, well, you have 10 2 times. So if you put them together, like that 2 groups of 10, you would have 20. So I think he's starting it off in a good way. Yeah, I think he's starting it off in a good way.
let's get more physical with it. And I'm going to do
And see, I don't agree with his application of it. I think he started out strong because the groupings, yes, it's more of identifying the amount of times that grouping appears. So it's not exactly about the groups themselves, but it's about a product of the group, which is the quantity of groups you have of similar size, right? So of identical size. So you can conceptualize it in that way. I think that's a fair assumption, or that's a fair point.
it using a physical object here. We're going to get real, kinetic with it. And I'm going to use the GamerSupps Moist Waifu Cup. So this is me on the cup, big titty anime girl. It's available at gamersupps.gg. I'll put a link to it in the description. It's available for the next 2 weeks. This just seemed like a natural segue into mentioning that while I demonstrate this. Now let's put this concept into practice in a real world scenario. You catch me at the grocery store, you say, "Pardon me, Charles, looking extraordinarily breedable as ever today. I have this box of moist Gamer Supps waifu cups. Come take a peek." And I march on over and I say, "By Jove, look at that. There is a single moist waifu shaker cup in that box. There is one box with one moist Gamer Supps cup in it. One box with one cup. I pick that up. I would have one shaker cup."
See, this is where I had a problem with it, because he said 1 cup per one box. And when you do a per operation like that, it's inherently division. When you have one person per house, you are doing one person divided by one house. If you had one person in 2 houses, you would have 0.5 persons per house, or half a probability that you would find that person in that one house. You don't do multiplication that way. That's not multiplication. That's division.
1 times 1 equals 1. That's
not what you've described.
just how it works. There's not.
That's not how it works. That's the exact opposite. That's the antithesis. That is actually the opposite, the exact opposite of multiplication.
Any scenario where all of a sudden this waifu shaker cup is going to start budding like it's fucking SpongeBob, and I'll end up with 2 somehow. That's
That object wouldn't do that, but the budding is multiplication. He could have described multiplication as a budding in that manner and been correct. Of course, the object won't be budding, but that's not a product of the quantity of cups. That's a product of the object not being able to bud. I think that's entirely besides the point.
not how it works. I have one box that has 1 cup in it. You come up to me again. This time it's at a Sam Ash music store. I'm fucking blowing away at a trumpet. You say, "Charles, check out these moist Gamer Supps waifu shaker cups I have in these boxes." I say, "Oh, how many cups are per box?" You say, "There's 2 waifu shaker cups in these boxes," and I have 2 boxes. 2 boxes of 2 waifu shaker cups. That's 4 total waifu shaker cups. 2 times 2.
That's not how that works. That's not how that works. Like you understand what I'm talking about here. Like, it is okay to just say you don't know multiplication. That is all right. My problem really with the commentary surrounding this is that we're all pointing and laughing at this man saying, "Oh my gosh, what an idiot. Dude doesn't even know about multiplication." Meanwhile, we do it from a platform where we are incorrectly describing multiplication. Like, you got to understand the irony there. Like, I know what you mean, but you're not saying that. What you mean to say is that if you had 2 shaker cups, hold up. If you had 1 shaker cup in each box and you had 2 boxes, then you would have 1 shaker cup 2 times. So you would have 2 shaker cups because you have 2 boxes. The boxes being the groups of the 1 shaker cups. If you had 2 shaker cups in 1 box, every box had 2 shaker cups in it, and you had that box 4 times, you would have 2 times 4, which would give you 8. That's, I think, what you're trying to say with this. You're not saying it. You're saying you have 2 shaker cups per, which is the division. And by the way, you know this because percent literally means per 100. Cent coming from century, or like it's the prefix that means 100. Like century or centipede or centimeter, right? That's the prefix that means 100. So per 100, that's percent. So if you have 1%, you have 1 part per 100. That's division. And you know that because you look at the percent line, that's a dividing line, division with the two spheres, and then that in and of itself represents the line and then the numerator and the denominator. That's what that means. The percent sign is literally a division, which is literally the numerator and denominator separated by the dividing line. And that is how much stuff you have per space. So if you have space like a box and you have stuff like a shaker cup and you have 1 stuff per space box, you're doing division. But what you're trying to say is the box is like a group and then you have multiple boxes. That would be, you would take something that's inherently divided and then multiplying it. I just think it's a clunky way to approach that. I know what you're trying to do, but I think it's a clunky way to approach it.
It's like this shouldn't be.
And plus, your math doesn't check out because
2 shaker cups in these boxes, and I have 2 boxes. 2 boxes of 2 waifu shaker cups. That's 4 total waifu shaker cups.
Okay,
2 times 2. It's
your math does check out, but it's a non sequitur of what you just said, because it doesn't necessarily follow that you had 2 shaker cups per box. I think what was really tripping me up is when you said 1 shaker cup per 1 box, 1 times 1. Yeah, I don't know. I see sort of what you mean, but I just don't. I think it's a really clunky way to approach that.
works. I have 1 box that has 1 cup in it. You come up to me again. This time it's at a Sam Ash music store. I'm fucking blowing away at a trumpet. You say, Charles, check out these moist Gamer Subs waifu shaker cups I have in these boxes. I say, oh, how many cups are per box? You say there's 2 waifu shaker cups in these boxes, and I have 2 boxes. 2 boxes of 2 waifu shaker cups. That's 4 total waifu shaker cups. 2 times 2. It's like this shouldn't be a hard thing for people to grasp. These aren't hard to understand. But when you have someone like Terrence Howard preaching just completely incorrect things, it's able to mislead people who want to believe in something different, that want to have this big paradigm shift in mathematics, which I don't really get. Why do you want mathematics to change? The only reason you're alive right now is because of that. You would have.
Here's the deal. Why do we want math to change? Because right now, how do you feel about mathematics? Like, seriously, tell me your favorite part of mathematics. I'll wait. No one likes math. That's the problem. No one likes math. It's incredibly difficult, clunky to deal with. Even earlier on, it's just like things are hard to conceptualize, they're hard to vocalize, and they're hard to actualize. In science, math is the hardest part, right? I myself went up to calculus, right? I went up to calculus 2. I passed that barely. Went to go take calc 3. Took it 3 separate times. I just couldn't. I did linear algebra, right? But I just could not do calc 3. I'm sure if I made it past calc 3 and I did differential equations, I would have loved that. But you really have to conceptualize math in a different way, because if you just try to do rote memorization or just power your way through it, it will be the most boring thing you do all day. And I love math. This is coming from somebody who really, really enjoys conducting arithmetic equations. If I can figure out something mathematically, I am extremely pleased. I love applying math to life. But the challenging thing is that it's hard to apply mathematics to your everyday life. It's really, really challenging. And if you can make it more kosher, if you can make it more flush to the way that you perceive your everyday reality, then it makes you more apt to approach problems in life in a mathematical way, which is, in my opinion, the most optimal way to approach life. Yeah.
Likely already been mauled by a bear, died from an infection, died from dysentery, wouldn't have made it past the Oregon Trail, like way before you even made it to whatever your current age is, if we didn't have math. We wouldn't be where we are today. You wouldn't be watching this. You would likely be out there hunting and gathering and probably dying in the process. There is nothing that changes about this kind of concept when it comes to math. Now, it's important to note, I'm not a mathematician. That's something Terrence Howard and I have in common. But I think if I was a mathematician, most of you would trust me less. You'd think I'd been indoctrinated by big math or something to keep the genius revolutionaries like Terrence Howard.
See, I don't know if this is necessarily true, because there's a way that you approach language when you are well equipped with the mathematical toolkits. It's the, you know, it's the with respect to, it's the insofar as, you know, like limits. It's gosh, I can't even conceptualize all of the linguistic similarities between language and mathematics, right? But you can tell when somebody has a large background in mathematics, because they will speak about probabilities, they will speak about limits, they'll speak very statistically, they'll speak in a language that can be very easily identified by somebody else who has experience in mathematics. There's a certain way that you speak about problems in mathematics that when you apply that to language itself, it's very, very telling. So like when I listen to Eric Weinstein, when I listen to Eric Weinstein, for example, I know that he has a hefty background in mathematics. It's the way he speaks. It's everything about the way that he speaks. I'll point it out in later videos when I really see it, because I mean, it being 2:30 right now, I don't have the intellectual capabilities, but yeah.
Howard down when it comes
You
to
know
these
it.
innovative concepts of new math. No, an actual child could prove why 1 times 1 will always equal 1 and never 2. It doesn't take a genius to prove that Terrence Howard is wrong.
It doesn't take a genius to prove that he's wrong. It takes a genius to come to his conclusion in the first place using correct mathematical applications. It would literally take a genius to come to those conclusions accurately. So what I'm saying that because I'm not saying that Terrence is a genius. I'm saying that if your math checked out and you came to the same conclusions as Terrence, you would be a genius. I am under the assumption that Terrence's math likely doesn't operate at a fundamental level, but I haven't dug into it, so I'm not sure.
It takes an ordinary person using their own brain a little bit. And Terrence Howard is hoping that you're not one of those people that think for themselves. For some reason, we've entered the age where people don't trust experts anymore. The individuals that have dedicated their lives to a certain subject like math now have the most scrutiny from the average ordinary person, thinking that they're wrong and evil. There must be like a puppet master behind the scenes controlling the experts.
A lot of experts are really fucking stupid, though. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. The only reason why they got to their position in the first place is because they studied a niche subject and didn't study anything else. They're very, very good in an extremely limited capacity. They understand the broad landscape of their discipline because they're reading papers about it all the time. They're consistently reading the background of every single nuance, right? And it all converges into a similar narrative. But let's be honest here. They overplay their hand. If you say that you have your PhD in mathematics, most people are going to trust anything that comes out of your mouth about mathematics. Whatever comes out next, they're just going to take. Now, somebody that really thinks independent, what they're going to do is they're going to say, well, how exactly do you come to that conclusion? What leads you to believe that? And if somebody says, well, trust me, I have my PhD, somebody who thinks for themselves, they're not going to take that. They're going to be like, no, that's not logic. That's an appeal to authority. Like, use your science, not your title. Tell me more. So, I don't know about this.
Instead, the average person would rather put their faith in someone that has never studied math and never done anything properly in the subject that they're preaching about, like Terrence Howard. He has dedicated his life to being wrong. Meanwhile, the experts that just get fucking torched by people that don't understand math have an entire history of inventions to show for it that these people are literally using to criticize them. These inventions that they take for granted is the product of that math, not Terrence Howard's teriology math. If teriology was the correct mathematics, where are those drones that he was talking about for Uganda? Where is all of the potential huge breakthroughs using teriology? Where are those inventions?
Well, that's true. That's true. That would be the ultimate conclusion. If he could, like, the reason why we don't study just classical mechanics anymore, the reason why we've now launched into, say, quantum mechanics, is because quantum mechanics is actually a more accurate way to describe the world, which granularly becomes classical mathematics at the grand scale. It's the same thing about like relativity, right? It fits exactly into our theory. It's just that we have to update our theory. It allows us to come to the correct conclusion with less assumptions. Like when we're talking about like a strong nuclear force or whatever, like electrostatic repulsion, it's like, you know, a natural consequence of classical mechanics is that the electron's going to radiate its energy off and it's going to crash into the nucleus of the atom. We don't see that. We don't see an electron crashing into the nucleus of an atom in a femtosecond because quantum mechanics exists. There's you know this strong nuclear repulsion force, and there's what else? The electrons exist within it's a energy diagram. It exists at the zero energy. What is that, like the zeroth law of thermodynamics or something? It's like if we and you can explain most of what we see in the world very fine with classical mechanics, but it's only when you get to the very granular scale or the very grand scale that you start to get really strange answers to your questions. You start to get really strange answers like the electron falls into the atom, or time dilation starts to occur. What the fuck is that, right? It's not exactly an exception. I think that that's more of an application of general relativity, but it's besides the point. All I'm saying is you start to get really strange answers to your question. I think black body radiation, that's another thing that just like completely stands in the way. Things that go to infinity, negative infinity or positive infinity, where there's negative infinity space between 2 points, right? That's when things come into contact. But when an electron comes into contact with an atom, it's not like you no longer have the atom. You just have the nucleus. Like, so you get really strange answers. And like when you put into the calculator, you put a series of numbers into the calculator, 5 plus 5 divided by 2 times 12, and then you don't put in the parentheses, and you get a wildly different answer. Like, say, for example, it takes 5 million seconds to get from point A to point B. And you're thinking, okay, well, I'm not that far away. Like, this intuitively does not make sense to me. That is what we see often when we have the incorrect theory in science. We get these absurd answers to questions. Maybe even like the answer that the sum of all positive integers equals negative 112, right? What a funny joke. The sum of all positive integers results in a negative fraction. An integer is by definition a whole number. You get a fraction and it's negative. That does not make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. But if you follow the conclusions in mathematics, that is what you get. A very strange answer to a very simple question. What if we summed up all positive integers? What will we get? Most people would say positive infinity. Obviously, duh, of course. If you summed up all of the positive integers, you're going to get more and more larger and larger numbers. And if you get more and more larger and larger numbers, you're going to trend towards infinity. And if you do that in the positive direction, summing positive numbers, you end up with positive infinity. That's just the conclusion. But if you actually follow the theories and theorems in mathematics, you end up with a negative fraction. What is that? Right? So that's just an example of our current capabilities in mathematics not producing the correct answer. On a surface level, if you're talking about shaker cups in boxes, it makes sense. It makes sense. It's like operating in a world where we're just ignoring air resistance and everything is assumed to be a box or a sphere. Very simple objects. And we can explain everything with just very simple F equals MA calculations, and everything is straightforward. This is an ideal world in its most explicit definition. Ideal meaning it's like the ideal gas law, right? Where you're making the assumption that makes the calculation easier. And then there's like very slight variations with like the actual space that's within a atom, right? And so you have to take that, and then the collisions with a certain amount of probability that it would come into collision with in the air, and that creates a small error in your original ideal calculation. But if you wanted to make the assumptions, then you can come to a closely correct answer. It's never going to be correct because you're leaving out a lot, but it's a closely correct answer. What this guy might be doing is attempting to find a way to consolidate the errors that we find when we do our calculations in mathematics. I don't know. I could be off base with that, but that's how I read that. As somebody equipped in science and mathematics, that's how I read it.
Now, over a year ago, I did make a video on Terrence Howard going over some of his more ridiculous and embarrassing moments. I'm not going to really harp on those here because a lot of people went from Joe Rogan to that video and said that I was just attacking him on like a personal level or something, which I really wasn't. I was just explaining why a lot of this is so silly and I was making fun of it, as everyone used to do back when we used to think for ourselves instead of just be spoon-fed all of our opinions. So, what I did talk about in that video is something I'm going to briefly mention, though. He tried to scam all of Uganda by promising them these drones that literally just don't work. I'm just going to play you a clip from that again to remind you that Terrence Howard uses this math in pretty nefarious ways from time to time, like in the case with Uganda drones from the hydrogen proton geometry.
Was there for 2 years until I saw that there was an inconsistency with the math there. And so I went out to explore a new way of understanding how the universe works, and I was able to define the grand unified field equation they've been looking for and put it into geometry.
Once again,
Grand unified field theory. I think what he's talking about right there is the theory of everything. Which is something that people at the highest level of mathematics, namely Eric Weinstein, right? You have Max Tegmark. You have, I think Sean Carroll might be working on that as well. And then you have like the cognitive theory of the universe. You have Chris Langan. You have a tremendous amount of bright individuals working on the unified theory. I think that's what he's talking about. It's the theory of everything. And really, it's trying to unify all of the theories in mathematics, all of the theories in physics, to some sort of equation that can explain everything. This is important because it's getting a little too late for me, but it's important because we have this set of equations wherein things can be derived from. You know, a lot of things can like go to zero, for example, but you have all of the variables within a certain set of equations that, you know, like let's assume x goes to 0 and y goes to 0, we can derive z. Or we'll do like the partial differential on z and we'll figure out what its differential is, which is just this change over time with respect to a certain dimension. You could do stuff like that. But really what it's saying is there an equation that we can begin with that brings together every theory? It's the greatest collab of the century, right? Or we have the Timmy Turners and the Jimmy Neutrons from different universes where we have the equations that come to mind are all very like chemical. It's just like, yeah, I can't even put it in a way that like makes sense to the general person, but is there an equation that assumes less but predicts more? That's what they're getting at.
again, just a friendly reminder, there is nothing more consistent than 1 times 1 equals 1. To represent it one more time, I have one box with one waifu cup in it. 1 times 1. The total waifu cups is 1. One box has one of these in there. There is one of these in total.
And then with that,
Yeah, again, I have to disagree with this method there. I have to disagree with this method because you're getting at the number of shaker cups by dividing it by the number of boxes. Well, it's just, it is, I'm thinking about it as a scientist, right? So I always think in the terms of like concentrations. I'm always thinking about like this per that. So I could maybe just have a biased perspective on things like I'm usually viewing mgs per mil, for example. So if I know that there's like 3 milligrams per 1 milliliter, I know that there's 3 mgs per mil. So I'm looking at a unit of mgs per mil. I end up with 3 because I get 3 mgs per mil. But if I had 3 mils, then of course I would have 3 mgs per mil 3 different times. And if I had 3 mgs per mil 3 different times, then I would end up with 9. I'd end up with 9 mgs. I understand what he's going for now, and I'm glad I revisited it. But yeah, I don't know. I have a different lens through which I can see that.
Geometry, I was able to put props on that. And what I'm saying is now we have invented a new form of flight that I
She's like, why are you zooming in on me? Could you please stop?
would like to bring here to Uganda.
Please, for the love of God, why are you on me? She's like, please, turn the camera anywhere but me. Could you?
It doesn't seem like Uganda's any closer to have that poor misguided people.
Okay, let's read this. A times A equals A. If 1 times 1 equals 1, 3 equals 2, 1 equals 0, and A times B equals A, then all of these impossible realities must also, wait. I think this is a misunderstanding of 0. I think that's what this is. I think the fundamental issue with this calculation is a misunderstanding of 0. Like, I think he's assuming that 1 equals 0. Because if you sub 1 in for 0, then everything shifts, and 0 times 0 would be, yeah, it would be 0. I'm trying to think of like 0 to the 0 power is actually going to be 1. I can count on all the elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. Okay, I call on all. Why doesn't he just like succinctly just say all schools? Why does he have to state each level like that? And he misspelled all. I called to Al, the nursery school teachers and kindergarten teachers. I call upon all the schools of Okay. So is he intentionally misspelling higher? Because that's not how you spell higher learning. And of all of the thinking branches of academia to do an immediate audit upon this false statement of 1 times 1 equals ing 1. So Richard Feynman had this really interesting perspective on logarithms, exponentials, approaching this different stage mathematics. He was way too smart, and he was put in, of course, the traditional classes. And so like he would finish all of his work, and then he would go back and like read his book and get like really far into the chapters. So he was pretty far and advanced for his age. And I think he got to like exponents and logarithms way before anybody else. And what he did is he actually created his own nomenclature of exponentials and logarithms. So much so that when he got to this section of exponentials and logarithms in school, it actually became a pretty big issue because he already created his own. He already created his own way. He paved his own path, and like it was sort of a learning curve for him to actually have to succumb to what people wanted from him. Like you can't talk about algorithms and logarithms and exponentials if you do so using your own nomenclature. People don't know what you're talking about. They have no context. So it's only when you use a shared language that you arrive at the same conclusion. So what he's doing here, from what it seems like, is he's creating his own path. And I think that may be to his detriment.
People a false axiom upon which to build their world. In a paper that's supposed to all be about logic and math, where the fuck did the Anunnaki sky people come from here like a jump scare? What in the world? That should immediately trigger your bullshit alarms. That is unhinged to include in this. Like, it showcases that he fundamentally doesn't even understand where math comes from in the first place. He makes it seem like math is something that was given to us. Math is not an invention.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You really don't have to Google it, but yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm trying to consider exactly why he Googled it to like prove his point. This to me almost seems like somebody Googling a math problem instead of just calculating it. I've noticed that, and even on streams, people will Google a math problem and have Google look it up. And it often results in the wrong answer because it makes these weird assumptions. Like right now, I want you to go in and type in how much does $40 an hour make, right? If I Google, like watch, I'll do it. I'll pull up Google right now. Right, I'll hit this tab, right? Big city. Wait, hold up. Yeah, I looked it up, dudes. It's a thing. Yeah, I Googled me. Yeah, I looked up Greenville. Yeah, I looked up the passport application. Yeah, I looked up how many pages in the passport. Yeah, I looked up Walgreens. Yeah, I looked up Cosmo Deeper Voice. Yeah, I looked up Sam the First Night, which is a Jersey Shore reference. I was trying to figure out what that what video that came from. And then this was just funny, right? Wow, LA. Dreams really do come true. All right, but that's a sidebar. What were we gonna look up? Oh, how much money does Elon Musk have? That's funny. How much money you make in a year at 40 an hour, right? This is what they're going to tell you. At $40 an hour, they're going to say you make $83,200. They're going to say you make $83,200. Now, I'm going to do the calculation really quick. I don't know if you could see that on here, but I pulled up my calculator and I'm going to do a quick calculation. I'm going to do 40 times. So like $40 an hour times 40 hours in a work week times 52 weeks in a year. You know what? It actually brings me to the right answer of 83,200. So this one actually gave me the right answer. But this one right here, right? A lot of the times what it'll say is you get a salary of 78,000. You'll see that a lot. You'll see like, oh, you make yada yada. But what they'll do, and see, they're calculating that correctly. If you make 15 an hour, it's 15 times 40 times 52, because that's 40 hours in a work week at 52 weeks. That brings you to the right answer. This is good. This is good. This is like an actual, that's actually what you would be making. The problem is when you get like this, where it says work hours per week 37.5. I don't know why we would ever assume 37.5. When did we ever get to that number? I'm going to take a guess and say that they are assuming 30 minutes or 0.5 hours every day, which multiplied by 5 is, 2.5. And then we subtract 2.5, right, from 40. And that'll bring us to 37.5. So that's assuming a half-hour unpaid lunch, which is quite the assumption. It's just like you're assuming that they have an unpaid lunch. Like, why would you assume that? What if they have a paid lunch? What if they have an hour paid lunch? Like, you have no idea. Why would you? So a lot of the times I'll see people Google things like that, and then they'll get a page that makes these wild assumptions. So
Math is a discovery. It's something we learned. It's not something that we created based upon an Anunnaki sky people gift.
that's true. That's true. Now, what you can do is you can illuminate certain aspects of everyday reality to people that aren't looking for it. The last thing to discover water is the fish. Fish don't know that they're swimming in water, really. It's just their reality. It's their air. That is the medium that they live in. So they don't consider water, right? Like they're floating around. Land to them or air to them seems extremely foreign. That might be a property for them that doesn't fit into their everyday reality. But in their own perception, they are just objects that are floating around. It's like floating around in space, right? For them, that's what that is. It's them floating around in space. If you are constantly surrounded by something, you don't consider it. It's only by deep introspection that you actually identify what surrounds you in the milieu that you actually live in. So when it comes to like different cultures, for example, can you teach another culture that doesn't consider mathematics? Can you teach them mathematics? I want to say, yeah, you could. You definitely could. I don't think that you could like make them interested in mathematics. You could barely make us interested in mathematics, and we like rely on it very heavily. Yeah. But he's right in that the language that we use is invented, but the concepts that they describe are fundamental. We did not invent that. We don't invent the actual things that we have described. Those things are there, whether we invented them or not, or whether we describe them or not. They're still there and they're still happening. But the way that we call them is going to be different. And the way that we conceptualize them will be different. But we'll arrive at the same answer despite how we conceptualize it.
A ruse from the Anunnaki. Also, I love how he can just slide in whatever nonsense he wants without any type of citation or proof behind it. Oh yeah, this is all based upon what the Anunnaki gave us 6,000 years ago. Well, trust me, I know. I was there, actually. I saw it. Terrence Howard, I'm immortal. I saw it. I was actually there during the trade of the Anunnaki geometry.
That's still an appeal to authority. I don't believe in those arguments. It's not even that I don't believe in the arguments. I don't think that those arguments stand by themselves, right? Because you could take that all the way back. Who granted you that authority?
And the naive generation 6,000 years ago. That's how. That's my proof. That's my evidence. Like, people just take what he says and just run with it. Like, oh, that's great. And like, they ignore it. Like on Joe Rogan, he had a whole section dedicated to how he can remember his birth.
I was inside my mother's womb. And I was about maybe 6 months inside the womb.
I think the square root of 2 is 1.6. 7. $1.4. It's 1.414213562373095. Okay. What's a 1.6 then? I think the square root of 3 is... That's 1.73. 1.732. What am I thinking of then? It's not root 8. It's not root 7. Yeah, root 4 is just 2, so I don't know.
And I'm like, okay, don't forget I'm here. Okay. Don't forget.
This is interesting to me because how do you conceptualize forgetting if you don't have a sequence of events that you've already forgotten?
You go to sleep, wake up again. Now something's moving in front of you. And you're like, oh, that's my friend. But I had a different name for it. I didn't know it was my hand. But I knew I had a title for it. Go back to sleep, all of those things. Then ultimately you get ready to come out. I remember all of that.
You remember coming out?
Remember being compressed.
That is legitimately not possible.
See, I think that that's a bad take. I think that that's a bad take because even though I find that it's unlikely that you would have memories before that, I don't think that that's impossible. You have a hippocampus. The hippocampus is responsible for encoding memories. If you have a brain that can encode memories, you have the piece of the brain developed that can encode memories. You have a working brain that is encoding memories. You can make observations through sound. A limited source of light. I don't think you can open your eyes, but I'm not sure on that just yet. Say, for example, before iFolds really form. Yeah. Like when you have translucent eyelids, you should then therefore be able to see through them. And thus be seeing the way that light illuminates the interior wall of your mom's uterine wall, bro. So it's just like, I feel like you have the capability of making memories. I don't think that it's common in our culture to identify the memories that we had in the womb, but I think that however primitive they are, I think we do have memories from the womb. It's just they're extremely primitive because we have no context to put them into. But I believe it builds our fundamental core of the human mind. You know, our subconscious.
There were some doctors that weighed in on this because a lot of people were like, this is incredible. He truly is like this super genius. He even remembers being in his mom's womb.
Okay, that doesn't make you a super genius, though. A genius would be ability to solve problems extremely quickly, or the ability to piece together a complicated series of words, being able to properly assemble a complicated series of words, kind of like Chris Langan. If you Google Chris Langan right now, Google Chris Langan, and listen to the way the complex series of vocabulary strung together in a poetic sense. Like he's unfathomable as a human being. You listen to Chris Langan and he's a masterclass in how to articulate oneself. That is intelligence manifest. Check out Chris Langan. He's exactly what you would hear from a genius. And he's got an IQ that's above our recorded ability, right? It's beyond 200. So if anyone's a genius, he is a genius. He's trying to construct the cognitive theory of reality, the cognitive theory of the universe, the CTU. So, you know, he's a great mind in that field. That is a genius. The ability to total recall or construct memories from the womb is pretty cool, but I don't think that makes you a genius. I don't think that makes you a genius. Even if you were able to do that, I don't think that makes you a genius.
You can't. You actually can't. You don't even start storing memories in your brain at those stages because it is still developing. So they're not.
All right, let's see. Because we were talking about the hippocampus and your ability to store memories in the hippocampus due to its development. This is making the argument that the hippocampus is not developed yet. All right, let's see what it says. When we are born, our brain is probably a quarter of the size of the adult brain. Okay, fair enough. Dr. Trend said, as the brain develops, it creates new brain cells at a rapid rate, disrupting previous memories and overriding them. Previous memories. So you do create memories, they are just overwritten. And if you, for example, set your intention to not overwrite them, which would be incredibly challenging. I'm really trying to give it the benefit of the doubt here, okay? But it would be incredibly challenging to do this. But if you did set your intention to not forget about something, kind of like many of us who have very, very early memories, myself included, I have extremely early memories. There's a point where we tell ourselves, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. Remember this moment. You are going to remember this moment for the rest of your life. And then you do. And it's incredible. You can almost remember it with every vivid detail. That is what he's talking about here. And any of us that have memories that early on can understand what he means when he says that. So this is saying that it creates new brain cells at a rapid rate, and it's disrupting previous memories and overriding them. That then therefore assumes that you've already created memories. Most of our memories are formed and stored in the hippocampus. Yeah, so that's exactly what I was saying. Most of our memories are formed and stored in the hippocampus, yes. At birth, the hippocampus is not yet fully developed, meaning it cannot properly perform important memory retrieval functions until years later. Memory retrieval functions. So you aren't able to completely recall memories at that age. As far as remembering being in the womb, it's certainly not a case that I've ever known or heard of. Okay, well, that's completely contextual. That's completely contextual within your own anecdote. I don't see that how that has any fundamental backing in science at all. Like, I understand that you're using doctor often in this, and I think that's very intentional. It's using doctor over and over instead of saying she, because it wants to reinforce the sense of authority in these statements. It's certainly not a case that I've ever known or heard of is an indication that this is a concept that's either not discussed or occurs with such rarity that it's not being described in the research. All I'm saying is that's extremely anecdotal. That's not scientific. But what she's saying is true up until that point. It doesn't follow from what she said previously. At birth, the hippocampus is not yet fully developed, meaning that it cannot perform important memory retrieval functions. So yeah. I mean, that means that your ability to make and retrieve memories is severely hampered when you have a brain that's growing. It's replacing the cells. It's overwriting neuronal activity. So I don't think that what she said so far implies that it would be impossible to make memories that early. It's just saying that she hasn't experienced that. I think that's a very different take on what Moist Critical's trying to levy here.
Not fully developed, thus those parts that are responsible for memory storage and memory retrieval aren't there yet. You can't. And you certainly
No, that's not what she said. She didn't say you can't. She said that it would be unlikely. I think that he's coming to this conclusion. He's jumping the gun to that conclusion unnecessarily. I don't think he's given the evidence that would allow him to draw that conclusion.
certainly wouldn't be able to recall them. Now, a couple doctors did say that in very rare cases, you can recall some feelings, which is why if you had like a traumatic birth, that could play a role in your life later on. Like you
Right.
do form memories as a baby, but due to infantile amnesia, you can't recall them. So the
Infantile amnesia. Does it describe it here? Other brain regions are also involved in memories, such as the prefrontal cortex, of course. The prefrontal cortex is it's of course going to be in front of your frontal lobe here, and that's going to be responsible for your directed thinking, your ability to executive function. Dr. Aaron Rubin and neuro, yeah. Like the hippocampus, it is not like the hippocampus, of course, it is not developed enough to assist in the storage and retrieval of memories over several years, he told. Okay, whatever. The brain structure responsible for emotional memory, the amygdala, is more developed than the structure for episodic memory. Okay. It may be possible to remember certain emotions related to birth, but that is also rare. It means that an emotionally significant event like traumatic birth can affect how a child behaves later in life, even though they may not be able to remember the event itself. Okay. Okay. So you can't remember like a series of events, but you could remember the emotion, the feeling that you got in that moment, like the feeling of warmth. But it's extremely unlikely that you'll remember anything from the womb. Yeah, he's saying extremely unlikely. He's not saying you can't. He's not saying it's impossible. He's not saying that something here prohibits it. He's saying that due to these situations, it would be very, very unlikely for that to be the case. Yeah, it doesn't preclude it though. I don't know why he's using the language that suggests that it precludes it.
Which is why if you had like a traumatic birth, that could play a role in your life later on. Like you do form memories as a baby, but due to infantile amnesia, you can't recall them. So the memories you're forming are things like
So he's using very definitive language. But every single doctor so far featured has always hedged their language and been very careful to not say definitively that you could not do this. I think it's very telling that the experts in the field would not agree with this take.
like your mother's face, shit like that. As a baby, you do form those memories. You can recall your mom's face, but as you grow up, you are never going to remember those moments. You can't, except in like extraordinarily rare cases, which don't have a ton of documentation surrounding or proof around. But there are a couple of cases where people do claim that they can. But in Terrence Howard's case, not even those extraordinary circumstances go as far as him, where he's remembering in the womb and saying to himself, don't forget, and then giving a name to his hand. That's just ridiculous. And then he says that the proof of this on Rogan is that when his wife was pregnant, he'd shine a light on her belly and then play music. And he did that for like a week. And then he stopped shining that light and playing the music. And then the baby's hand pushed on his mother's stomach. That was his proof that Terrence Howard remembered everything in his mom's womb. Once again, a complete misunderstanding of the things that he's fucking talking about with it.
I will admit that is a bit of a non sequitur. A non sequitur, obviously, meaning that it does not follow. It doesn't. That's not the sequence. It's not a sequence. He's saying that I did this action at this time, playing this music, and I got this observation. My baby, pushed their hand. That is a product of classical conditioning, sure, but you can do classical conditioning to an animal. And many animals don't have a concept of time or have that's even hard to say, right? That's even challenging to say, but I think that their ability to conceptualize time is extremely limited. But I mean, you can't even say that definitively. So I don't know. I don't think that that's proof. I think that that's like a interesting observation, but I don't think that that's proof of this like wildly obscure concept.
And there were a lot of people that said like, oh, that was a really weird section, but he was right about everything else. Why are we ignoring things like that? That is not something you should ignore. That is very clearly a red flag in the logic and the person behind the logic. It's ridiculous. Like they're like, oh no, he was definitely weird about the whole remembering being in the womb nonsense, but he was totally right about gravity not being real. Like this.
Okay, but like, I think that the memory thing in the womb has more merit than anything else he's saying. I mean, yeah, people might find that weird, but I think that's because we all went through it and we don't have that same experience. I have certain memories that I think arose from that point in life, but I don't know exactly how to articulate those or conceptualize them in my mind. You know, like I have certain obsessions with certain type of feeling, right? Like, is that a feeling that I got while in the womb? You know, while feeling something that was extremely safe and completely content. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Proving gravity, he fucking nailed. And 1 times 1 equaling 2, absolutely on the money with it. Been saying it for years. It's so ridiculous. People just want to believe in the most, like, I don't even know the right word for it. The most over the top special ideas just to feel like they're smarter than everyone else.
No, that's true. That's very true. People want to be special without doing special things, without making sacrifices, without putting in the work. People like, and myself is completely included in this, right? Like if I had like 5,000 people watching me, like I would be extremely pleased and I would put in no more additional effort. Like the reason that you would put in extra effort or learn certain skills is because you're not getting the results that you want. And so you have to change something about you to change the result. But if you could just make yourself special without doing any of the work whatsoever, that is the route that people would take. You know, they have every incentive to do that. So people want to believe in absurdities like this because it makes them special. It gives them some sort of special understanding. Everybody wants to be a Wiccan, right? But no one wants to learn Latin. No one wants to learn the secrets to the spells. They just want to be like, oh, I'm so mysterious and I can cast spells. Like, if you think that, you know, if you just believe, man, if you just believe, that's all you need. Like, Occam's razor will tell you that you should believe in the most simple explanation for it. Are there secret gremlins? Or is that just mold growing on my bread? You know, like it's probably just like a biological material. That is the more simple explanation than I have secret moles or little gremlins that are like eating my food in the middle of the night and leaving like their little crusties on it. Like you have to believe in the most simple explanation for things. But people have the tendency to learn these lavish explanations.
At least that's the impression I get. Because there is no way you would ever logically reach these conclusions unless you just wanted to believe Terrence Howard because it's fun and it makes you feel special. That's the only way. Because if you ever try and employ any of these in the real world, they fall on their fucking face. Again, 1 times 1 never equals 2. So if you ever try and use any of the teriology in your day-to-day life, it's not going to work. You're going to be left high and dry with your dick in your hand. It's not going to function. It can't. It doesn't. And for some reason, we are now in this age where people are just like, it doesn't matter. He's probably still right. Like, what the fuck? It's so stupid and frustrating. It really is.
I think the most frustrating part, though, is people not being able to properly perform mathematics or describe it to a sufficient degree. That's the most frustrating part. People don't fundamentally know mathematics. It's part of the reason why I think that we should reinvent the way we think about it, you know? But Charlie was making the opposite case earlier, so I would think that he would disagree with what I'm saying here.
Like, again, I'm not even mad at Terrence Howard. Like, it's not a crime to be dumb, and it's not wrong to like pursue things outside of the already established, you know, mainstream belief system. I think that's extremely important to a healthy society, always challenging the things that you're given. But this is the exact opposite. People aren't challenging what Terrence Howard is feeding them. They're just accepting it with a fucking smile on their face and not asking any questions. Yeah. Terrence Howard pursuing this is not the biggest deal in the world to me. In fact, I do think in a lot of cases that can be really helpful. If someone goes out and challenges like some really well-established theories or whatever, like, let's see. It's always important. But he
Yeah.
has come back with incorrect conclusions and still preaches about how everyone else is wrong without ever demonstrating why he's right. He has nothing to show for his teleology. No creations, no inventions, nothing. So it should immediately right there stop for him and be like, okay, you know what? This was, a fruitless endeavor. I didn't get anything out of this. Maybe the math that we have is correct and is consistent because look at all we have to show for it. Look at all of this around us. We are surrounded by the product of mathematic breakthroughs. And
Yeah.
Terrence
Yeah.
Howard's math has nothing like that. So it should have come back like, okay, it was worth a try, didn't happen, we move on. And then he could have gone into different avenues to pursue more knowledge or more discoveries, but he hasn't. He has locked himself down to something that is completely false, and he's taking as many people with him as he can. And
Yeah, I don't like Charlie. I understand that it is so important for people to challenge the status quo. Yeah, I think that you should definitely push back on Terry's ideas. If and just question them as much as possible. I think everybody should question them, and they should have the ability to break things down to a point to where they can come to the correct conclusion, regardless of who's telling them what. My concern is that people just don't want to engage with math in that same way. If this gets people excited about math, and if this results in people trying to prove him wrong or using his own theories against him, I'm fully in support of it. I think people should do math more. So if this gets people to do math more, then I think that we should engage with it. I don't think that that's the consequence here, but if that were the consequence, I'd be here for it.
And I think that shit sucks. People need to stop just taking in other people's perspectives as their own and start actually just thinking for themselves and putting into practice the things that they're being told to see if they make sense and if they're right. That's it. I mean, that's really about it. I'm not going to keep droning on about this. It's just so fucking frustrating. That's it. See ya.
That is actually a different outro. That is a different outro. He doesn't normally outro like that. Interesting. That really riled him up. If he had a different outro, that's quite telling. He must really be wrong, or he must really be mad. But no, I think that's a really interesting concept. It's a really interesting way to approach mathematics. And if people benefit in a certain way from this, then I'm here for it. Yeah. I was really interested in the periodic table version of that, but I haven't sat down and watched that part of it. Maybe I'll do that on stream next time. We don't have an invisible man anymore, so RIPs in the chat for an invisible man. Let's see. Let's do a little chat. How about this one? Eyes purple crying. There we go. Sorry to see you go from the Labdominal page. Labby D. All right, guys. I'm gonna get out of here because it's 3:30. It's way too late. I should have went to bed like 2 hours ago, but it's whatever. I love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. And if you're watching afterwards, we'll probably edit this up and actually release it. But given how I've just talked in circles during the stream, I don't know if I will. So if I do, then that's one thing. But if I probably expect that I don't do that. Yep. Love you guys. We'll see you on the next one.